Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
I'm Bill Dries with the Daily Memphian, joined now by Memphis mayoral contender J.W. Gibson. This is On the Record. We record Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. This is the day after the deadline for candidates to file the first campaign finance reports of the race for Memphis mayor, which is on the ballot in October, with early voting starting in mid-September. And JW, your report on this was very basic and very simple. You financed your own campaign during this quarterly report to the tune of $300,000 of your own money. Talk a little bit about why you chose to start this way.
So, Bill, I have to be honest with you. The way you positioned the question, it kind of makes it sounds like I'm financing my campaign entirely by myself, and that's not what we're doing.
Right.
What we wanted to do was send out messages loud and clearly about what we attempt to do throughout this campaign. We're making an investment in Memphis, Memphians, and myself because I believe there are better days ahead. I believe, as Mayor Warden used to say, in one Memphis, where we all can come together for a better Memphis. I believe in self-determination, and all that want to have a better life would have a better life. I believe there's an opportunity waiting to come to Memphis that if we got the right leadership, we could recruit and bring them to Memphis. I believe we have some of the best non-for-profit organizations in the country right here in Memphis. We're going to pull those to the front and form partnerships to do the work. I'm sending a message, Bill, that we're running a high energy and engaging campaign. So we need financial support and in-kind support. And I also want to send a message that if you think money makes you a special person in our administration, it doesn't. I've made many investments throughout Memphis, like the United Way Drive-In the Dream, Hattie Lou Theater, Chisco Hotel, senior housing in West Memphis, James Lee House in Victoria Village. I firmly believe that we will have a positive return on our investment in this campaign. However, by no means do I look to fund this by myself.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up, and the reason I framed it that way, is because this is really kind of unique for political campaigns, at least in our city and our state, because usually it's one or the other. We saw Phil Bredesen in his first bid for governor in 2002. He self-financed that campaign all the way through, and so what you're looking for here is it's basically a sign of faith to contributors, right?
Correct, absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. How do you gauge what your level of support is to undertake this campaign with contributions and what you've also put in there in combination in a crowded field of at least 9 contenders? Because as you may know, there's a lot of talk about splitting votes among that many contenders. Are you concerned about that?
Yes, we're concerned about that to a degree. The first part of your question, how am I doing as relate to other financial support? The honest truth is that we, as you look at other candidates, we're kind of late in getting into this process. A lot of candidates decided to start this endeavor extremely early. We didn't choose to go that route. So with the timing in which we actually submitted our paperwork for treasurer and the time by which we needed to make the first financial report was short. As you saw in the statement that we released with our financial report, we just formed a financing committee. So I don't think we've had an opportunity to truly see the type of support that we will get from contributors. What we do see is some positive support around those who are wanting to help us raise money. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. You appointed a treasurer, I believe, on December 2nd, according to the form. And actually, this mayor's race is pretty unusual. I was just looking at some campaign finance reports from the 2019 race before we started this podcast. And of course, that was a very different race because you had an incumbent seeking a second term. But his challengers, Willie Harrington and Tammy Sawyer, basically started from zero, and their first campaign financial reports were for the period that ended in April and began at about this time in 2019. So this is kind of a different race, I think, for everyone.
It is.
Right. So you had $300,000. Sheriff Floyd Bonner had, I think, 311, and Paul Young had something like $347,000. So is $300,000 kind of the point of entry for anyone who comes into this at a later point?
So I honestly believe it is. And I think that's what all of the political talking heads will suggest to you. There have been a lot of people waiting with bated breath to see what this first report will look like. Some have even suggested that those that were already committed to the election, if they weren't able to come to a healthy level or a competitive level, that they might need to consider doing something different, mainly because of the number of people you alluded to being in this race. So I do think that's going to be the starting point for the average Joe or whomever decides to get in to be taken seriously about competing with the rest.
Okay. All right. You're a businessman, a philanthropist, and a former Shelby County commissioner. How much, if at all, does your time on the county commission inform your decision to, in a figure of speech, get back into this business of politics?
Well, I have to tell you, you probably remember my stint there as a commissioner. I was one of those guys who stayed under the radar. I never sought the attention from the media or things of that nature. I came to work, got my job done, and we went about our business. That time spent from a government perspective was very, very, very beneficial for me. It gave me the ability to understand better how government works. It gave me the tenacity to read through a lot of documents, to understand the true difference between bureaucrats looking to do their work, us as elected officials looking to do our work, and the community as a whole with their desire to see something get done. So it gave me those basic understanding and appreciation. Government work is not easy. Being an elected official is something you would hear people describe as a thankless job. I don't look for the thanks. I look to get things done for the community that I believe in so dearly and I love so much that I don't care whether or not you thank me or not. So I submit to you the experience back in 2006 through 2010 did help. It did help me to finalize my thoughts around whether or not I wanted to take this challenge on. It kind of gave me a view of what to be expected.
And I would imagine that the work you've done since then, and you mentioned your work with Hattie Lou with the Lee House, other civic endeavors that you've been involved in. Do you look at those and think government could use some of this way of doing things?
Interesting that you asked that question, Bill, because I so desperately believe that here in Shelby County, Memphis, Tennessee, we have some of the brightest not-for-profit organizations in the country. We do not utilize them enough. I think they bring to the table a metrics of accountability, creativity, of how we could do things different in the government and hold people responsible at the same time. We're not using them. One of the things you will see in my administration is bringing those not-for-profit to the front and forming partnerships with those organizations to get the work done.
Okay. You talked in your statement that you issued after your campaign finance report was in. You talked about the status quo. Are you running to continue Jim Strickland's general goals and the brilliant at the basics strategy over his last two terms, or to just take this in a completely different direction?
With all due respect to Mayor Strickland, I don't believe in being brilliant at the basic. There are so many opportunities reside here in Memphis and from others outside of Memphis that want to come into a progressive city, a city that's looking to do things, not be brilliant at the basics. So we would definitely look to turn up the heat considerably around how we look at economic development, workforce development, community development. The piece that I really truly appreciate from the Strickland's administration is the work that's being done around downtown Memphis. However, I want to be emphatically clear that we have got to take this up a notch or two. We have got to be inclusive to some of these communities that have been divested in for decades and haven't seen investments for a long time. In order for this city to be all she can possibly be, they have got to be included.
Right, and that's been the real sticking point in terms of issues like affordable housing and in terms of, as you said, economic development in general, is how do you take it to areas that have historically been disinvested in, where there hasn't been investment, but actually a withdrawal of investment over a long period of time. It's not as easy as I think it looks downtown. And by the same token, some folks that I cover who do work downtown will say, well, wait a minute, it hasn't been easy downtown either. So it's a high bar to move that kind of economic progress beyond the areas where it's expected, isn't it?
I don't agree.
Okay.
With how you're positioning the question, Bill.
Okay.
And I agree with the notion that this is not easy work. It is not easy work. However, some of those same subsidies, some of those same initiatives that were utilized in order to create the development downtown, you can have in South Memphis. If you drive southward from downtown, it's amazing how everything stops at Crump. That's not because Crump and southward of Crump is any more difficult to put support behind than the northern portion of Crump. But yet that's where it stops. And the point that I'm trying to get to, Bill, is when you take a look at programming subsidies like the pallet. We tried to create a TIF district for South Memphis because we wanted to focus on that Crump area. The TIF was cut tremendously in size. We wanted to take some of the pallets that were rolling off from the South Main area. That were rolling off. Now, these are pallets that were given to private developers. Love the work that they have done in in South Main area. So I'm not trying to take anything away from that. What I'm suggesting to you is that our efforts to try to continue that support that was given to those private developers, to developers who wanted to do something with Metro Shopping Center, for example, were not allowed. And it's not because it's difficult.
Mm-hmm. So,
but it was not allowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so what's I think known as the Soulsville TIF wound up becoming a smaller area in the process, and it's controlled or administered by the Community Redevelopment Agency. So you think there's a better way to do that?
So I have no problem with CRA leading the effort if that's what they think they're capable of doing. My only problem is when you take a look at the size of the TIF that they resolved themselves to, there's very little tax increment. That's the whole purpose behind the concept of utilizing the TIF, is to hope that you will be able to pull the tax increment in order to support the development that you want to see happen. That's not going to happen
Right.
with a small TIF.
And did you also want to see some increment there, as you mentioned, from the roll off, which we should explain to people when an incentive like a pilot is over, the property that was to benefit from that begins paying property taxes, city and county, at the full rate. And so that's what you're talking about when you talk about using the funds once the pilot rolls off, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
You understand the TIF pretty well, huh?
Well, I've written about a number of them.
Okay.
So TIFs and pilots and TDZs, we've got quite a lot of letters in the alphabet there. Let's talk about city government. Go back to that for a second. What do you think of the way that city government is structured currently?
Can you be a little bit more specific?
Well, we had in 2010, I think we had a referendum on city and county consolidation. We've also had some discussions that have been short of that, where people have talked about various things that the city could do, maybe stagger council terms so that all 13 seats aren't up at one time, and things like that, things that go to the basic structure in the charter.
Okay. So it just so happens that at the time, County Mayor A.C. Warden appointed me to that consolidation committee when we last took a look at it. Just for the record, and this might cause me some angst, but I have to speak my truth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very supportive of consolidation. I think we could benefit from consolidation. Short of consolidation happening, I think it's very, very crucial for the two mayors and their administration to work together for the efficiency and the effectiveness of this city and county. And I think that can be done as well. And it hasn't always been done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily see a need for changing the city council structure or the county commission structure. I believe if we were able to get the two administrations to work closer together, we could see some benefits.
Okay.
But again, overall, I do favor consolidation.
All right. Okay. A final point. The topic of the day, the topic of the month is Tyree Nichols and what happened to that young man at the hands of Memphis police officers. Do you think the city has a problem with the overall police culture, or where do you think the specific problem is here that the city should begin addressing with this?
I'm not informed enough to say where they need to address and what issues they need to address. I agree with the chief of police, 100%. In how she reacted to the death of this young man. I agree with the notion of counseling that special unit. I agree with the notion that an audit and an understanding of how those units operate ought to be done. Where do we go from here? After receiving a written report from an independent agency on the status of not only these special units, but hopefully a study will be done on the whole police department to determine whether or not there truly is some problem with the culture of how the Memphis Police Department operates. But we won't know that until we do have that independent study provided to us. I want to say to you emphatically that I am 100% behind the notion that where there is efficiency, we need to change it. Where there is a lack of accountability, we need to change it. And not being an expert in that industry, I, as a layman, would submit to you that if we're going to create a special unit, those participating in that special unit ought to have some special training. They ought to have an analysis done on their ability to be a participant of this special unit. We do need to do more homework on how those special units are supervised. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around this notion of the creation of a special unit, if that's what we look to do down the road.
Okay. All right. We've been talking with Memphis mayoral contender J.W. Gibson. I'm Bill Dries. This has been On the Record.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.